And now for linear and nonlinear functions. Number 7 asks, if you were to graph all of these coordinates, would they form a linear pattern? Remember, linear means a straight line. So one thing you could do is you could graph all of these points and see whether or not they form a straight line. The other thing that you could do is you can look and see which one has a constant rate of change. Because remember, if it's got a constant rate of change, that means that it's also going to be linear. So I'm going to look at A. So this is going up by 2, then 4, and then 8. This is going up by 1, 1, and 1. So you'll notice it doesn't have a constant rate of change because 2 over 1 is not the same thing as 4 over 1. So now for this one, it's going up by 1, then 2, then 3. This is going up by 2, then 1, then 2. 1 over 2 is not the same thing as 2 over 1. So that one doesn't have a constant rate of change. See, this is going down by 1, then it goes up by 1, then it goes up by 1. Well, this goes up by 1 every time. Negative 1 over 1 is not the same thing as 1 over 1. So it looks like it's got to be D. Let's double check. So this is going up by 1 every time. These are all going up by 2 every time, which means this one has a constant rate of change of 1 over 2, which means that D is the one that is linear. Remember that when you've got an equation, there are 3 different types we've talked about that won't be linear. One of them is when you have an absolute value. And the reason for that is if you were to graph it, absolute value is always positive. So if you graph it, it's always going to be up here in the positive section of y, which obviously is not linear. The other one is if you have an exponent, and we'll get into a more complicated reason for it later. But in a case like this, again, anything that is squared, a negative times negative is a positive, and a positive times positive is a positive. So everything would be up here in the positives. So if you have an exponent that is also not linear. And then last but not least, if you have any kind of a number divided by x. Because if you were to graph it, x cannot be 0 because you can't divide by 0, which means you would have a big hole. So all 3 of these cases are not linear. If you've got absolute value, if you've got an exponent, or if you're dividing by x. So number 8 says, which of these is not linear? Well, this one right here has the exponent, which means that D is the one that is not linear. So that's the answer to number 8. Number 9 says, which one is linear? Well, in this case, you're dividing by x, which is not linear. Here we've got this exponent, which is not linear. Here we have absolute value bars on either side, which is not linear. So that means the answer has to be D. So for both 8 and 9, the answer is going to be D.